Kenshi, a desolate, post-apocalyptic wasteland full of psychopaths, robots, beak things, and whatever the hell this is. Kenshi's one of my all-time favorite games, so it came as a bit of a shock to me when I realized I'd never completed a zero-to-hero run before. Now, it's no secret that I've been on a bit of a skill grinding kick recently, so I figured today would be a great time to head back into the crazy land of Kenshi and spend some time trying to create one of the most OP characters this game has ever seen. We'll start as a measly slave in the Rebirth mines, and through hard work, determination, a bit of racism, and an overabundance of exploits, we'll turn this waste of a human into a god. The mod list for this run is down in the description, and while you're down there, you might as well subscribe since I post stuff like this weekly, and it'd be a damn shame for you to miss it. I also launched a third channel recently, so if you're interested in more of my unhinged ramblings on things like TV shows and movies, feel free to check it out. I'll have it on screen now, in the description, and set as the pinned comment. Alright, enough plugs, let's do this. Meet the protagonist of our story, Leaky Bum. For the model, I found Igor the Sag, so I just imported him, and this is what I got. I went with a human Greenlander because I'm the type of person who picks human fighter in D&D, and I just like playing as humans in Kenshi. I also think doing something like a Shek warrior would make it a bit too easy for combat skill grinding, and that's not what I'm about, so human Greenlander it is. Leaky Bum's journey begins in the Rebirth mines, imprisoned by the Holy Nation Empire for having the gall to rip a sick air guitar solo to Freebird during prayer time. Our first task is getting acclimated to the slave lifestyle. Rebirth's actually a really good place to start. It's one of the only areas where you can grind out several key skills without ever risking death. For example, I can grind out a few levels of Liberating, or I can walk around in stealth and practice assassinating the guards. Even if I get caught, they knock me out, raising my Toughness skill, and then toss me in a cage where I'm free to grind out some lockpicking. Most of day 1 was spent power leveling my stealth skill. Pretty easy to do considering Leaky Bum was just following orders, only instead of running, he just crouch walked everywhere. When I wasn't busy crouch walking around the mines, I was unlocking my shackles and stacking them in my inventory to help me get encumbered, which in turn boosted my strength gains. It's not shotgunning creatine and PEDs, but it's the next best thing. By nightfall, I'd managed to level stealth to 27, toughness to 3, and lockpicking to 4. The biggest issue that night was the fact that I'd been beaten into a recovery coma, so all that time I could have spent training thievery and stealth was instead spent participating in the John McCain experience. Once I finally regained consciousness going into day 2, I broke out of my cage and got to work leveling thievery a bit, using the Holy Flame book off a nearby table. If you're sitting there asking yourself why I'm not stealing the food, well, when you're a slave in Rebirth, your hunger won't drop below 100. So typically, the go-to strat is to avoid touching any food until the day or two before you're planning to escape. That way, you'll be able to get your hunger above malnourished, which means you can run faster than Stephen Hawking and actually escape instead of just getting stone cold stunnered at the front gates. Anyway, I spammed the Holy Flame book until 4 AM, which got me up to Thievery 39, before getting so beyond bored with it that I just threw myself back in the cage to work on lockpicking. Since the guards caved in my chest yesterday, I decided to take it easy during the work hours. I've got 4 sets of shackles on me, so I'm gaining strength XP pretty quickly. The downside of that means it's difficult to do literally anything else, so I just had Leaky Bum walk around all day at 3 times speed to see what I could get his strength up to. I also had him sneak walk everywhere to get some more stealth XP, which turned out to be one of the best decisions I've made so far, though I did end up getting caught several times. Look at what they did to our boy, just folded him like a damn pretzel. After waking up at around midnight heading into day 3, I escaped from my cage again and turned my focus to bonking my fellow prison mates in an attempt to get good at assassinating people. As it turns out, Leaky Bum is more of a Thomas Crooks instead of a John Wilkes Booth, so he's got some work to do. Well, it took around 3 hours and 20 levels, but we managed to complete our first knockout. I also learned that you can effectively stack knockout attempts if you just keep spamming them over and over, so I just kept doing that, and by morning, I was up to level 22. Obviously, the grind starts to slow down once you can start thumping people to the floor, since there's a cooldown timer until they regain consciousness. Add to that the fact that, spoiler alert, you get better at shit if you practice it, and you get more knockouts, which means more downtime, which means less XP. During the day, I managed to rip off a good 7 or 8 levels of stealth before getting noticed and sent to the Shadow Realm. My stomach and chest are fucked, so I spent the rest of the day at 3 times speed just walking around the camp, slowly leveling strength and athletics and waiting for nightfall. Heading into day 4, I'd gotten my strength to level 9, which is way below where I was hoping to be, but it's not horrible, at least given the circumstances. That night, I tossed all my shackles into a barrel and headed downstairs to mess with these sleeping guards. I originally planned on just practicing my assassination attempts on them, but what ended up happening was that I walked away with a full set of Holy Nation armor. This gave me an idea. What if, instead of just booking it and hoping for the best, well, what if I just threw on all the armor, impersonated the guard, and just walked out the front door? That became the plan, but I needed to boost my strength and deal with the fact that I looked like an Ethiopian child, so I started stealing food whenever I could, slowly building back my energy. By around 9 AM, I'd managed to snag 2 loaves of bread, some dried fish, and some dried meat, along with a first aid bandage, splint kit, and a leather vest for some extra armor protection. I also managed to pick up most of the armor and move it outside, so that whenever I was ready, I could just scoop it up and make a run for it. All that was left to do now was wait for my hunger levels to return to normal and I'd be good to go. Moving into day 5, the guards must have known I was up to something because they started standing like a foot away from my cage at night, which kinda sucks when the whole goal of Rebirth was to move around at night. Luckily, Kenshi is a buggy game. Don't get me wrong, it's part of the charm and a big reason why I love it. It also means that I can just spam pause, break out, and go stealth, which for some reason confuses the guards into not noticing anything I did until after I picked up a meat wrap and another dried fish. At this point though, there isn't much I'm willing to risk since the last thing I want to do is pick a fight with a guard and accidentally cripple myself. So I spent the rest of the night breaking out of my cage and trying to knock out the sleeping guards. This only worked for around an hour until they got pissed at me and just decided to stand near the front door until the bell chimed. I just now realized that I'm not wearing pants. Nice. Alright, I know I probably should have waited another day or two, but I saw an opening towards the end of day 5 and I took it. Basically, they left the entire northern strip unattended, meaning I could just stealth walk my way literally right up to the gate and then just sprint to freedom. The guards ended up chasing me all the way down near the safe shack before beating me unconscious and trying to recapture me. Apparently, they must have gotten distracted by something because all but one guard ran away, allowing me to limp into the house and shut the door on the guard, who just immediately gave up. It kind of reminded me of that SpongeBob episode with all of the Plankton's family and the one that can't read, so he just kind of runs away at the end. Anyway, we're safe, at least for the night. Leaky Bum's leg is still in bad shape, but there's a few beds here and a ton of food, so I can just rest until I'm fully healed and then figure out another plan. Thankfully, the beds heal at 8 times the normal speed, so I was ready to go by 8 AM. The Safehouse is loaded with starter gear, so I took an hour or so to gather anything of value, such as a few loaves of bread, some medical supplies, a katana, and basic armor, and a sleeping bag. Our skills are okay for day 6, but definitely could have been way higher if I just min-maxed Rebirth a bit more. That being said, I do find myself getting bored of Rebirth after around 3 days or so it was probably for the best. Now to decide on where to go. Usually, I just make a run for the hub. Actually, looking back, I think I've gone to the hub first on literally every Kenshi video I've made so far, so you know what? We're gonna change that. For the remainder of this run, I'll be avoiding the hub entirely. It's time to spice things up a bit. You know what? Fuck it, we're going to World's End. Obviously, Kenshi is full of skill-grindy exploits, and don't worry, we'll be abusing some of them later on. But for now, I wanted to take a more conventional approach to getting set up. Especially if we're going to one of the more risky sections of the map, being Cannibal Country. I made it to World's End by early afternoon and immediately got to work stealing a bunch of shit I need to survive out here. Namely, a crossbow and 2 sets of bolts. I went with a specialist grade spring bat because these things hit like a fucking bus and I'll need that extra damage. The plan is simple. I'm going to try to kidnap a cannibal, then fire one bolt to weaken it, and then use that weakened cannibal to grind out a few early levels and combat skills. Once I had my weapons, I hit up the travel goods shop and stole a small thieves bag. This one doesn't have any combat debuffs while wearing it, and allowed me to almost half of my weight that I had in my inventory. From there, it was down to the shoreline to find myself a cannibal. I do think it's funny that I've gained more athletic levels in one day than I did in 5 full days at Rebirth. Just before midnight, I managed to sneak up on a cannibal patrol and kidnap one to train on, before setting them down and slingshotting them into fucking orbit. While searching the area, I managed to spot him running back to his tribe, so I knocked him out again and brought him back into the plains. You know what? Fuck this. Luckily, I was able to find a wounded cannibal roaming the area, so I tried to fight them, only to realize I was completely outmatched. That being said, this is Kenshi. If you're losing, you can always just pull out a crossbow. For my Call of Duty fans out there, I like to think of this as the equivalent of getting into a quickscoping 1v1 with someone, only for them to pull out their pistol as soon as they miss the first shot. Anyway, since I forgot just how powerful my bow was, I ended up kinda ruining it for myself after giving the cannibal a one-way ticket to meet God. So after a quick rest, it was back to scouting the area for another target. It didn't take long before I came across a small tribe in the distance, only to see a random NPC, Hex, just mindlessly walking directly into them. I wanted on the record that I did try to help Hex. Like, genuinely, I did try my best given the circumstance, but these are cannibals, and we're still poor little leaky bum. That being said, we put up a hell of a fight, mainly due to the crossbow. During the aftermath, I tried to bully a few scrawny bandits, only to get dropped by one. Thank God for Tanishi, another random passerby who just came over and kicked the shit out of the scrawny cannibal, catapulting me 50 feet into the air. Even though I aimed for the bushes, I still ended up kissing the dirt. After waking up, I noticed a few wounded cannibals making their way back to camp and couldn't think of anything better to do, so I just started bullying all the crippled ones since they couldn't fight back. You call it punching down, I call it free XP. That evening, I stumbled upon an abandoned village and chose to turn it into a makeshift base for the next few days, mainly because it's loaded with gear and beds that I can use. Since beds heal at 8 times speed compared to sleeping bags at 4, this was an easy choice. I just had to hope no cannibal war parties decided to show up. That evening, I found a hungry bandit all tied up just outside of another cannibal camp. I was able to free them, but they immediately just took off running, so I decided to follow them for a bit, just to see where they ended up going. After chasing them for about 2 hours, they just kind of vanished and then reappeared hundreds of meters down the road, so I just let them go and started making my way back to town. While I was running back to the abandoned city, I happened across a cannibal patrol, only to piss off the entire group after trying to practice my knockout skills on them. Luckily, there was a cannibal hunter camp just on the other side of the hill, so I just kited the cannibals over to the camp and let them get absolutely obliterated by the hunters, even joining in on the fight myself. With the battle won, I took some time to help heal up the hunters who literally saved my life, before looting the cannibals and heading up to World's End to turn a profit on the day. Selling all of the gear netted me around 1,500 cats, which is enough to buy some food and maybe a pair of boots. A bleak reminder to how capitalism has ruined our great Kenshi. To stick it to the man, I simply stole 2 much more powerful weapons. The only issue now is I have nowhere to put my crossbow or extra gear. My offhand weapon also weighs 23 kilograms now, which is a bit excessive. On an absolute rampage, I stole a helmet before heading over to the armor shop and grabbing a high quality plate jacket. Funny enough, I was able to steal a metal jacket just fine, but the fucking leather shirt is what set off the alarms. At least I'm sufficiently geared now though. Sure, I'm carrying almost 4 times my recommended weight, but it's fine. As it turns out, the citizens of World's End took that Chumbawamba song to heart and just kept knocking me back down every time I'd stand up, eventually putting Leaky Bum into a coma out in the middle of the town. It took several hours, but eventually, Leaky Bum managed to get himself back on his feet and begin making his way back to the ghost town to recover. This is still a shit ton of weight to be carrying, so my plan is to just start grinding strength like crazy for the next few days, then see where we're at weight-wise, because there's just no way I'll be able to win a fight when I can barely lift a sword. Thankfully, there's an iron deposit literally right next to the ghost town, so I got started on that since I'll be using it to grind out strength. We also have a visitor. I don't know who's naming these people, but this man is Kenshi Jesus, not Beanhop. Also, what the fuck kind of name is Beanhop? Also, this one's name is just Stinks. Anyway, back to Leaky Bum. We're over that 70% encumbrance threshold, which means we're gaining strength at about 25%, so I started walking around the outskirts of the town, only to be greeted by a rabid bone dog. This was more of a blessing than a curse, since I can carry the bone dog now, bumping my encumbrance up to 80 and giving me 50% strength XP gains. During my travels throughout the night, I found a random outpost guarded by some ninjas. I had to practically beg for my life in order for them to let me go, so safe to say I'm not gonna fuck with them for a bit. By the time the sun rose on day 10, I'd managed to get my strength skill from 15 up to 19. A small gain, but still nowhere close to where I need to be. Because of this, I made plans to spend the day continuing to work on it. Until a fucking Beak thing showed up out of nowhere and tried to end the run early. Thank God for the crossbow. While it lay bleeding out at my feet, I was struck with a fantastic plan. If I could stabilize this thing before it died from blood loss, I could throw it in my sleeping bag and grind out a ton of levels of my combat skills, along with dexterity and strength. The only problem is that it's got a blood loss KO going on, so there's not much I can do with it right now besides wait. At least I can pick it up and run around with it, which is funny to watch at least. While I was waiting for the Beak thing to recover, I noticed some commotion in the distance, only to find Eon's corpse getting ripped to shreds. No idea who they were, but I guess it doesn't matter anymore. Since the Beak things are in that direction, I turned around and went in the opposite. The last thing I wanted to have happen was to be ambushed by a herd while minding my own business. I'd rather take my chances with the cannibals, to be honest. I also watched a group of ninjas get mauled by some bone dogs. Now, normally I would have helped, but fuck those guys. Heading into day 11, I dropped a sleeping mat and placed the Beak thing into it. I also went ahead and dropped all that iron and moved around my inventory so that I can go from like 10% strength XP in combat to almost 60. If I drop my swords, I can get all the way up to 100%, so I'll just be punching this thing for a few hours. I know everyone loves to go martial arts as their combat skill since it's so overpowered in the later stages, but for now, I'm just going to use it to hopefully power level strength. Alright, now all that's left to do is reload the save and get to work. So, as it turns out, I was wrong. Shocker, I know. I'm not gaining any strength XP, even though it says it's at 100, so I tried to reverse that, and grabbed as much shit as I could, and make myself as heavy as possible. Sweet, I'm only gaining 1 to 2% per hit for strength, but my dexterity and martial arts skills are skyrocketing. At one point during this training montage, I became a goat herder. If you don't know, these things can fuck you up if you're not careful. There were simply too many of them though, and since I didn't want to risk all my gear despawning, I ended up joining forces with my enemy to overcome these satanic goats. And even the beak things were no match for them. This part was always hilarious to me because I like to imagine there was just a random family passing through and they looked up to see this fully armored wanderer just throwing haymakers with some wild goats. I never thought I'd see the day where a character of mine was beaten in hand-to-hand combat by a fucking goat. After regaining consciousness, I ended the day with some more martial arts practice on the trapped beak thing. I wonder what PETA's reaction to this would be. After a rather eventful day of grinding and getting molested by goats, we've got strength and toughness at 26, dex at 35, and martial arts at 32. Not a bad start. This is admittedly a very cheesy strat, and one that gets boring very quickly, so on day 12, I killed the beak thing, cooked all the raw meat it had on it, and set off to grind on with a more conventional method. Cannibals are fun, and we'll definitely be back to deal with them later on, but they're not great for money making. You know what is great for making some cash? Collecting and distributing the heads of Fogmen princes. It also allows us to recruit a new friend. Before we get there though, we've got to get through this shithole and the spider mechs walking around. I'm out of medical supplies and my leg's getting worse. The only real shot I've got here is to try to make it to Burns' tower and then just pray he's got a few bandages laying around. Nope. Alrighty, well fuck you too, Mr. Robot Man. Well, it took the rest of day 12 and into the morning of day 13, but I finally made it to Burns' tower. Unfortunately, there's no medical supplies here. Well, there is, but it's all skeleton repair kits. Also, Burn isn't here, so he either got by the robo-spiders, or he's off on his own adventure. Since his tower is of no use to me though, I set off to the nearby ruins to see if I could get lucky there. Well, that explains why no one was here. Rip Burn, I guess. You're as useless in death as you were in life. Don't worry, I totally didn't just spend a full day crawling towards an empty ruin. Fucking Christ. By day 14, I'd made it to another set of ruins. This one had a few ancient science books in it, along with some generator cores and a few weapons, but still no medical supplies. At this point, I think it's pretty clear that I'm not going to find any first aid kits in the skeleton wasteland, so I changed focus and began crawling towards the west coast. With any luck, I'll run into a high village or something along the way and can purchase a few bandages there. I'll just have to pray I don't walk into any cannibals or beak things first. I guess this is karma for cheesing combat the other day. You know, this actually reminded me a ton of that impossible start challenge I tried a few months back, where the first 10 days were effectively just hobbling a little torso through the same exact environment. God, that sucked. Ever wonder why it's called the Shrieking Forest? These guys will just butcher me, so instead, I changed focus entirely and headed back to the eastern portion of the map. The only true safe house I can think of is that slaver escape hut near Rebirth that I spent a night at about 10 days ago. The only problem with that is I have to go through skeleton turbo robot spider hell again. It's taken 5 days of walking like this, but finally, we've got bandages. After using almost an entire bandage to heal up, I threw myself into the nearest bed for the rest of the day on account of my left leg having negative 300 hit points. By late morning on day 18, Leaky Bum was fully healed and ready to party yet again. Alright, let's try this out one more time. On to Mongrel. Welcome to hell. The first thing I did when I got here was sell all the gear I'd been carrying, along with that hacker that weighs over 20 kilograms, for a secondary. With the new cash, I bought a small shack and got to work building out a research bench. With the bench serving as more of a storage chest than anything, I set out to go confront some fogmen. As it turns out, I'm still pretty ass at fighting. We're getting better, but good god we can't block for shit. It was pretty clear I was outmatched from the jump, so I started making my way back to Mongrel. I did get a little nervous here, but because I noticed 2 guards getting kidnapped while making my way back, and I was planning to use them to help save me if I did get dropped. Luckily, the fogmen were distracted by another set of guards, which allowed me to finish off the sole straggler before heading back inside for the night. While making my way to the bar, I was greeted by the one, the only, Beak. The next morning, I set out to raid a few fogmen camps after fully healing. Along the way, I ended up freeing a shinobi guard who was about to be eaten alive. Unfortunately, there's no payment that comes with it, so it's back to hunting fogmen princes. Obviously, the biggest holdup with fogmen is the fact that they roam in packs of fucking 50, so it's pretty difficult to actually win fights against them as a solo. On the bright side, they like to tie you up first once they capture you, and given that I spent the first 5 days doing basically nothing but grinding lockpicking, escape attempts are pretty easy to pull off. So my workaround for fogmen is to simply not use a katana. Instead, I'll use a gladius that I borrowed from the local weapon shop. Alright, we're gonna have a serious problem if we can't win a 1v2 against these dorks. Three times is enough for one day. Thankfully, we've got Beak to come save us. On the morning of day 20, I came across a small patrol of heavy fogmen and my first fog prince. I'm still too weak to take them on in melee combat, so I relied a ton on using my crossbow, and then swapped to the blade for a few taps. When all was said and done, I was able to sell my first Fog Prince head for 6,000 cats before hopping back into one of the beds for a few hours. Throughout the rest of the day, I won a few more fights but never managed to find another Fog Prince. What I did find, however, was the Fog King's throne. I didn't manage to kill him or even kidnap him, but I was able to break in, loot a few medkits, and kill 2 Fog Princes, which will double my income. Throughout the night on day 21, I just focused on leveling stealth. You can find these Fogmen camps sprinkled throughout the fog, and as long as you're far enough away, you can just stealth walk and you'll just power level. Once I hit level 75, I moved over to stealth knockouts, getting it up to level 40 before being caught and retreating back to Mongrel. Most of day 21 was just spent attacking Fogmen camps. Leaky Bum's getting to the point right now where he's able to take on small groups of them, but those larger swarms or fog heavies are still a bit of a problem. That being said, I'm starting to get a bit bored of Mongrel. It's fun for a bit, but I've always preferred the desert to this shithole. One place I haven't really spent much time in Kenshi is in the west, so I grabbed a bed to heal up, stole some food, and began making my way in that general direction. And if you're asking yourself, well, what about Beep? We're gonna be here for a while. The only downside of heading west is having to travel through Beak thing territory, but that's why we travel by night. After spending the entire night running through the west, I decided to head back east. Why? Well, because fuck you, who cares? Honestly, I really don't know why, I just felt like heading east, so I did. Of course, to do that, I had to pass through the swamp, which was just a frame rate killer. I'm sure one day I'll spend some time here, but not right now. You know what? I said that, and then a member of the Red Sabers attacked me, and now I'm kinda thinking I need to go into the swamps and wipe them from existence. I'd argue that the swamps are one of the most dangerous biomes in all of Kenshi. It reminds me of Dagobah from Star Wars, you know, that planet where Luke goes to find Yoda, and then Yoda just gets so bored of Luke asking questions that he just fucking dies. Good times. But yeah, it's loaded with river raptors, blood spiders, hostile factions, these fucking mushroom things, and on top of all that, if you try to speed up the game, it just shits itself with loading screens every 5 seconds because there's so much going on all the time. As soon as I made it to Shark, some random douche picked a fight with me, which, for some reason, plunged the entire city into a full-blown gang war zone. We had gangs fighting gangs, guards attacking those gangs, random shopkeepers stone-cold stunnering civilians. Shit was crazy. Anyway, welcome to Shark. Oh, I also stole a coat off a guard because it was a specialist grade and has basically the same protections as my plate armor and none of the debuffs. I ended up loving this place so much that I bought a house. Sure, there's a tree bugged through the rooftop, but it's mine. The riot continued well into the night and was only made worse by the fact that some blood spiders had found their way through the front gates and had begun eating people alive. This is the Swamplands. This is what they have to offer. I figured the best thing for me right now was to get the hell out of Shark. So, heading into day 23, I began wandering back through the swamp, hunting more red sabers. I know they have a base around here somewhere, I'm just not entirely sure where, and I couldn't be bothered to look it up, so here we go. Well, it didn't take long until I found an outpost in the distance and began making my way towards that. This was exactly what I was hoping for. A stealthy approach seemed like the best way to go about this. There had to be like 20 guards in the building, so I started by knocking out and kidnapping them one at a time. I could have just executed them while they were unconscious, but I figured I owed them at least an honorable chance to defend themselves. While he had some initial success, Leaky Bum had made one fatal mistake. He got too greedy, accidentally pulling the entire group of bandits and triggering the Red Saber boss. Luckily, I found this little spot in the marsh where all the bandits just get stuck piling up in the water and allowing Leaky Bum to just shower them with bolts. This went on for several hours until the leader got fed up and charged me, only to be put down by a bolt through his eye socket. Surprisingly, this didn't kill him, so I grabbed my gear, took his sword off of him, and then made my way back to Squin to retrieve the 10,000 cat bounty he had on him. With the bounty cashed, I decided to take a little break from using a crossbow and started working on my toughness skill. The plan is pretty simple. We're going to take Leaky Bum and run him all the way over to the Great Desert. Once we get there, we just need to look for a large group of bandits who are more than willing to kick my ass. To help with this, I stole some samurai armor from the shopkeep in Squin before beginning the journey east. It took most of day 24 to make it to the desert, but by that evening I came across my first set of enemies during the aftermath of a battle against a skimmer. I was expecting them to knock me out, but I wasn't expecting them to just run away after, which kinda defeated the purpose. On the bright side, this wasn't my target, so after a night of resting, I was ready for hunting another massive bandit group. After spending the first half of the day running around through the desert looking for burning bushes, I came across a small group of bandits that I was finally able to farm. Kinda. They were able to put me into a blood loss coma, which really sucked, but once I recovered, I was able to gain 2 levels just by standing up. Though I didn't initially get stuck in the plain dead loop. Regardless, I was able to get up and move in between both of the bandit camps, so that when I finally recovered from my second blood loss coma, I could gain that bonus XP from more than just 5 enemies. Well, that was the plan anyway, until the fucking manhunters showed up and wiped out the entire bandit group. And at that point, I was too annoyed to really care, so I just ran over to Stoat and rented a bed for the night in an attempt to heal up just a bit more. After spending the night passed out above a bar, I came up with the idea to head into Bast. It's constant warfare there, so all I need to do is piss off one side and take a spear to the skull at the start of a battle, so that very quickly became my new plan. This is exactly what I was talking about. Look at how large some of these patrols are. The only issue with this is that I need to recover and continue to get out of the plain dead stance while they were still in range, and I don't think that's necessarily possible since the patrols don't stop moving unless they come into contact with another faction. So we'll have to figure something out for that. Luckily, the perfect opportunity presented itself when a small samurai patrol appeared in the distance. I picked a fight with a high paladin and tried to hold my own until the samurai made it over. For whatever reason, they're not all hostile towards me after I get knocked out, even though I'm trying to kill them, but I did manage to get a few rolls in before getting knocked out again, bringing my toughness up to 52. At this point, it was clear that none of my strategies were really working as I'd hoped, so I came up with a new plan. Head back west and find a camp of dust bandits. Let myself get KO'd right next to their camp, and then hope no one else comes along to wipe them out. It's a safer approach than what I'm doing now, and I can always come back here once I'm a bit stronger. It also means I don't have to deal with any cannibals, which is also a plus. I managed to find a dust bandit camp towards the end of day 27, and brought Beak down to serve as a medic on the chance that I ended up in a coma that I couldn't recover from on my own. Now this is exactly what I wanted. And I know I've said that a few times in the past like 10 minutes, but for real, this is what I was hoping for. When I first started, my toughness was 53, and by the end of that day, I was up to 74. Not bad for just a few hours of grinding. That being said, Leaky Bum was pretty weak at this point, so I made a run for it, which got me back to our camp, though I lost all my food in the process. Bad Teeth was nearby, so after resting up, I gave my heavy gear to Beak and made my way over to the Holy Nation City to steal some more food. With enough food to last me for the rest of the playthrough, I dropped my extras near Beak and ran back into the Bandit camp to continue farming toughness. It may have been a bit overkill, but I spent literally the entire day doing this. This is unrelated, but look at how many bolts this dude has just sticking out of his body. My man's read the Fellowship of the Ring one time and thought he was Boromir. Crazy. Anyway, this ended up bringing me from toughness 74 all the way up to 87 before I called it quits for the night. At this point though, I was so close to hitting 90 that I just said fuck it and spent all of day 29 doing the exact same thing. By the end of day 29, I was up to toughness 92. One funny bit about this that I didn't really notice until I was wrapping up was that all of the dust bandits were slowly getting picked off by the crossbowmen, so that by the time I called it quits, there were only like 4 or 5 dust bandits left since all the others had been killed by friendly fire. Oh, also, update on the bolts. How many do you guys think are in this shot? I'd say at least 200 plus, something like that. Regardless, we're up to 92 toughness, so I'm happy. Leaky Bum's defense is also up to 61 now, which I completely forgot about, so that was really cool to see. It's not insanely high or anything, but it'll help a ton with combat as we get into it a bit more. With toughness now in the 90s, I changed focus to strength, but before that, I needed iron, so I guess it's more laboring at the moment. There's an iron node nearby, so I had Leaky Bum start mining that so that I could fill my inventory. I know I've done a bit of work on leveling strength, but I'd like to get it up into the 50s or 60s before continuing, and sure there's some min-max ways to do it, but I'm simple, and I always like to go with the tried and true, fill up your inventory with iron and carry an NPC method. I kicked off the strength grind on day 31 by loading up my inventory with iron, and then slinging Beak over my shoulder. I like to imagine that this is what those old ladies who jog with the 2-pound dumbbells think they look like. Anyway, when I started the day, I was at strength 38, and by the end of the day, I was up to 44. Going into day 32, I went ahead and bought 2 wooden backpacks and spent the rest of the day mining some more iron to keep scaling my weight. Day 33 kicked off with a big strength marathon, if you want to call it that. This continued for a few days, and by a few days I mean like 2 weeks, until I was able to get my strength up to 80. Why 80 and not the 90s? Because by the time you get to level 75, it takes like a full day of doing this to get maybe 1 level. It should come as no surprise, but this was incredibly boring, so to keep myself busy, I just got super into Fallout Shelter for some reason. I'm not even kidding, I went full free-to-play on mobile and grinded up to like 150 Vault Dwellers, maxed a few out and started questing with them. I was full-on sucked in. So yeah, that's how I spent my time while walking back and forth. With the grind essentially completed, I made my way over to Bad Teeth to sell all of the iron and the backpack since I don't have a need for it anymore. So what now? Well, we've got a ton of skills left to grind, but first I wanted to see how much of a difference 80 strength makes, so I set off to find a massive group of hungry bandits to see if I could take on like 50 Ethiopians and live to tell the tale. I'm still keeping the samurai armor because it drops my martial arts levels by like 20 with both pieces, so I'll still be able to get a few more levels into that if nothing else. I couldn't find any massive roaming horde of hungry bandits at first, but I did manage to walk into a triangle bandit patrol, so I gave them a try, and I got my ass beat. Like a lot. So instead of continuing this cycle, I just dove back onto the sleeping bag to recover for the night. I did manage to get a second chance on the morning of day 52 when I found that roaming group of hungry bandits and squared off against them. This whole fight felt like that mantra of death by 1,000 paper cuts. They only do like 2 to 5 damage per hit, but there were times where I'd take 5 to 10 hits at a time. Sure, I could do 70 to 90 damage every swing, but that doesn't matter if there's 50 of them ready to pounce on you the moment you fuck up. That being said, I was able to kill 3 and cripple a few more, but ultimately, even the great leaky bum couldn't stand up against the overwhelming numbers of the homeless. After spending the rest of the morning laying in bed, I swapped gear with Beak and began the next stage of our journey, leveling assassination and stealth. It's not hard at all, and honestly, it's one of my favorite things to do in Kenshi. I don't know why, but there's just something so satisfying about bonking a random NPC. It reminds me a ton of Skyrim, where you'd go stealth and pickpocket an NPC and poison them, or just sneaking up behind them and taking them out to loot a shop or something. God, I miss that game. I gotta replay it sometime. Anyway, the best place to do this was on the guards right outside of Bad Teeth. An unsuccessful attempt gave me about 3 levels, but also alerted the guards. Don't worry though, we want that. Why? Because it gives me a chance to work on my crossbow levels and melee attacks. Judging by the fact that my defense is up to 91 when my Saber is equipped, I think I'm good with that skill. And once the guards are all taken care of, I can come back and farm them for more assassination XP while they walk back. Thanks to that 91 defense, I'm also able to 1v1 high paladins. Kinda. They don't do much damage thanks to that 94 toughness, and my defense makes it hard for them to even land a shot. Because of that, I'm able to just kind of play the time game with them, and even with only level 37 attack, I can just dodge, block, or tank the damage until I land enough hits to knock them into a coma. It's actually incredibly satisfying to watch, and I found myself sitting here for several minutes at a time just watching the battles unfold instead of just skipping them. They are also the obvious targets at the moment, since an assassination attempt still gives me a few levels every try. The landed hits give me a ton of melee XP, and the fights just look cool to watch. I mean, come on, who doesn't love a good 1v1? This continued well into day 53 because I was just having too much fun to stop. I even brought Beak over to set up camp just outside of Bad Teeth in order to rest for an hour or two whenever I needed to recover. One major point of emphasis here, though, is that I wasn't killing the guards after beating them, just taking their medical supplies and any loose change on them. But there was a reason for this. You can't farm high paladins if they're dead. That's basically it. There will be a time where I do wipe out an entire city with just Leaky Bum, but that's later on in the video, and we have so much more grinding to get to first. After running out of bolts for my crossbow, I decided to have some fun and switch up to martial arts for a bit. Just kinda steamrolling through the guards, which is even crazier when you consider the fact that my martial arts skill is only 34. Just imagine what this would look like with level 60 or 70. Eventually, I did what I do best and got way too cocky, resulting in Leaky Bum getting swarmed by guards and taken prisoner. Hell, they even got Beak too. Luckily, I was able to drop most of the gear before being taken, but they did get my legendary Saber, so I'll need to steal that back at some point. I did try to escape and find the sword, but was caught almost immediately. So if I would have let myself heal a bit, I probably could have taken these guys, but since my chest is still 1 or 2 hits away from caving in, I decided to retreat back to the cages and heal up for the rest of the day. If I was a good and reformed boy, I'd serve out my 182 hours sentence and start a new life as a miner. But then Dr. Disrespect would end up in my DMs, and nobody wants that. Since I didn't want to deal with that, I rested until around sunrise on day 54, working on lockpicking while I waited. Once I was ready to go, I broke out and ran downstairs to hopefully collect my gear. It became pretty obvious that one of the guards had simply kept my sword, but I didn't have time to worry about that. Most of the city was after me, and another guard patrol came in to assist, forcing me to take cover in the river. Now once I'd recovered, it was time to find my sword. Now luckily, Beep had dropped the katana that I'd given him like a month ago, so I wasn't going in completely empty-handed. I was able to take out a few guards, but there were simply too many, and Leaky Bum once again found himself locked back in a cage. As I was gearing up to make another escape, I think I got my answer as to who has my sword. See, I found some bolts on an escaped servant, but when I went back into my cage, Inquisitor Tavos, the leader of Bad Teeth, came over and took the bolts off of me. If he was willing to run all the way over for something as simple as that, I'd imagine he'd be sprinting over to take my sword off of me. After a few hours of rest, I made another run for it, once again making it to the river. From there, I made several small attempts to start whittling away the guards, but there were simply too many patrols in the area for me to make any real progress. That was, until the patrols cleared out some hours later, in which case I pushed back in and began slowly working my way through the guards. The strategy was really simple. I'd pull the guards out by the river and let Leaky Bum do his thing. When I needed to, I could simply have him dive into the river until the guards dropped aggro, in which case we could get back out and heal up before repeating the process. I will say, this longer katana fits Leaky Bum really well. He's been shredding with it ever since he picked it up, and his katana skill has gone up over 20 levels in that time. As the sun rose on day 56, I just said fuck it and started executing the guards in order to get through the front gates. That was the only change though. I was still aggroing the guards and pulling them out to the river. The only difference was that instead of leaving them for dead, I was finishing them off now. This went on for most of the morning, as Leaky Bum sliced his way through not only the guards at the gate, but began making his way into the town, only for him to get his stomach crushed and end up back in a cage. That being said, Beak was able to escape, grabbing the extra gear in the process and making it to the river. While that was going on, Leaky Bum broke out, stole a set of bolts off another escaped servant, and made it out to where Beak was, scooped up the crossbow, and took out another guard. With both Beak and Leaky Bum in relative safety, it was time to head out. After watching Lee go to town with that katana, I decided to just continue on with that, leaving the legendary Saber to Tavos. I do think it's pretty funny that the most efficient method of transportation is for Lee to just carry Beak. I had noticed a marker on my map labeled Broken House, so we had begun making our way over there. What we found was something. A man by the name of Slave King owns this place. He's got 98 attack, 89 defense, 90 strength, 100 toughness, and 100 dodge, meaning we don't stand a chance without a crossbow. He's also got a ton of hungry bandits just tied to poles as slaves. So, what was the plan? Well, originally, I used the Slave King as a way to farm assassination. This doubled my levels from mid-40s all the way up to 87 before I finally knocked out the demigod. After stealing his weapon and some medical supplies, I hid and watched as he came to, walked over to the slaves, and just began eating one alive. At this point, I grinded out one more level, bringing my assassination skill up to 88 before successfully knocking out the Slave King, and beginning the journey back to Stout since he's only wanted by the United Cities. By morning on day 57, I'd made it to Stoat and was able to collect on the 80,000 cat bounty tied to the Slave King, bringing the fortune to up over 100,000 cats. With the bounty turned in, I purchased a house in Stoat and placed the blueprint for a research bench. Of course, as soon as I started on building that out, Beak was attacked by a group of hungry bandits, forcing Lee to abandon his new project and run back to save his friend. While on the way back, Lee came across an armory in the middle of the Iron Valley, so I changed focus and started picking the lock on the front door, because I'm a loot goblin and can't leave this stuff be. The place was loaded with high-quality weapons, but there was one particular safe that piqued my interest. It was a level 91 safe, so I was expecting to find a legendary-styled weapon, only to open it to find an MK2 Executioner sword. Lame. Funny enough, I found a specialist grade Eagle's Cross and a Masterwork skeleton arm, so I grabbed that and went to go get Beak so that he could carry the Eagle's crossbow so that we could use that in the future. With Beak secured, we headed back to the armory, looted the Eagle's Cross, and made our way back to Stoat, arriving just after sunrise on day 58. Now in relative safety for the first time, really ever if you think about it, we got to work on some valuable research, after completing the T2 research bench of course. This was all luck, but the bar owner next door actually had the specific blueprints I needed, which was furniture to build out some structures. You'll see why that's important in a second though. For now, it's off to find an unlucky NPC. And who better to target than a cannibal? Shout out Slave King for letting me grind my assassination skill, because those 100% knockout guarantees are a lifesaver. With our test subject now in custody, it's time to build out the holding cell. And for this cell, I used 2 metal tables and a wooden crate to make sure the cannibal couldn't escape once he woke up. Unfortunately, I tried to reload the save after completing the build, and he's gone. For whatever reason, the samurai guards had just borrowed the cannibal, but were sure to return him after finishing. Since the cannibal was in a recovery coma, I sent Beak out while Leaky Bum got some rest at the nearby bar in order to give the cannibal time to recover from his coma. Alright, fuck these guys. It looks like the cannibal must teleport onto the stairs when he gets up, but that doesn't even matter considering the guards took him as soon as I opened the door. To deal with the fact that the cannibal was teleporting onto the stairs, I moved the setup to the opposite corner before heading back out in search of another victim. I found another cannibal during the night going into day 60 and brought them back to base in order to try the whole setup out again. This time, however, I got out of the house before the cannibal woke up, and when I got back in, boom. Unfortunately, it didn't work. To try and fix the issue, I removed one of the tables and added 2 food barrels, hoping that blocking the line of sight would help with the aiming issue. With the trap set, it was back to waiting until the scrawny cannibal came out of his recovery coma. Well, this was a giant waste of time. Not wanting to go through all of this again, I gave Leaky Bum the Eagle's Cross and set out to find some bolts for my next epic quest. And what better place to hit up than World's End? After stealing 8 sets of long bolts for the Eagle's Cross, Leaky Bum began making his way west, specifically to Leviathan Coast. It's time to level the crossbow skill the best way I know how. The Eagle's Crossbow is actually incredibly important here since it's got crazy range, so I can shoot Leviathans from relative safety. I'm sure I probably could have figured out what was wrong with the current exploit build, but shooting Leviathans is just so much more fun. Full honesty, I've got a few hundred hours in Kenshi, and I've never been to the Leviathan coast. Whenever I want to hunt Leviathans, I just head south to Stove's Gamble, so this was a huge change of pace, and I gotta say, I'm really digging the purple vibe here, and I was really excited to see what kind of NPCs are out here aside from just Leviathans. Obviously, those things were everywhere, which honestly wasn't a bad thing because it meant I could start on my epic crossbow grind very early on. Leaky Bum is currently level 27, so I'm just going to try to kill a few of these things and see where I'm at when I run out of bolts. It took 2 full days, but I managed to kill my first Leviathan, bringing me up to crossbow level 43. By that point, I only had about 3 stacks of bolts left, so I picked out one of the Leviathan pups and got to work taking that one out as well. I figured the smaller ones gave me a chance to actually kill them with 3 sets of bolts, whereas the larger ones required more like 4 or 5 sets of bolts to bring down. It took only a few hours to take out the second Leviathan, but as I did so, I noticed a submerged outpost in the distance. It wasn't until I got up there and opened the door that I noticed all of the robotic spiders guarding the building. Luckily, as I was preparing to take them on, a pack of Garu came wandering through, sparking a small fight. While the spiders were distracted, I took them out, looting their AI cores to kill them and obviously keep for myself. Now, normally I'd keep these for research and building purposes, but they sell for a ton of cats, and there were so many spiders there that I could just keep a few at the end or find them at another outpost in the south somewhere. It took almost the entire rest of the day to make it back to World's End and sell all of the AI cores and Leviathan pearls. With the cores and pearls traded in, I went ahead and filled my inventory with more bolts, hoping this would be enough to get me up to 60 or even 70 for crossbow levels. If you don't know, you don't gain XP on damage or range or anything like that for crossbows. It's all based on time spent aiming and using the crossbow, which is why that strategy of locking someone behind items works so well. You can aim at them, but without a clear line of sight, your character won't shoot. I just fucked it up, leading to the current Leviathan killing spree. Day 64 was back to hunting Leviathans. As much as I'd love to go back to the outpost and continue farming AI cores, I simply had too many bolts, and what better way to burn through some of them than by firing them into these Honey Boo Boo-esque abominations. After running it around the starling shrapnel in the dirt, I was eventually able to get a Leviathan stuck on it all, which means I can just stand here and fire at it instead of constantly looping around. By the end of day 65, I'd burned through almost all of the bolts, killing 2 Leviathans and raising my crossbow skill up to 62, which was pretty solid. Now these pearls are 12k a pop, so even when you factor in how much the bolts cost, you're still netting a nice profit. But you want to know what's more profitable than this? AI cores. After killing another robot spider, I set off back for World's End, due to the fact that the crossbow skill drops during the night, so I figured this was a great time to head back, drop off the pearls and the core, buy a few more sets of bolts, and then make it back by morning. In preparation of the mini raid, I bought a bigger thieves backpack, a better helmet that, while not offering as much protection, gets rid of that perception debuff, which should help me hit my shots a bit better. As I reached the outpost, I had to take on a few Garu that had been following Lee through the mountains. This is where the coolest moment of the playthrough so far, at least in my opinion, occurred. See, as I baited a few of these spider drones out to take them on, a literal army of Garu came charging down from the mountains to my aid. And then while they were fighting the spiders, several Leviathans were rushing through the water to join the battle. In the midst of all of this chaos, Leaky Bum was able to avoid any major injuries and loot the broken spiders for a ton of AI cores before dipping back to World's End in safety. I made it back to World's End early on the morning of day 67 and sold all of the AI cores, bringing my earnings up to over 300,000 cats. With the AI cores sold, it was back to the outpost yet again. There were still several spiders in the building that needed to be cleared out, which means there's still several hundred thousands of cats to be made. taking out a few more of the security spiders, I noticed that most, if not all of the remaining spiders had just kind of wandered out into the middle of the water and were sitting there idly. Taking a chance, I pushed inside, looting the chests and storage areas for anything of value. Notably, a Masterwork Ranger bow, a solid backup katana, and an MK2 Guando polearm. I think that's how you pronounce it. But yeah, it looks dope, and I was really excited to try it out. Before leaving, I killed one more security spider, looting an AI core, and dropping my Gladius for it to fit in my inventory. Moving into day 68, Leaky Bum began his journey back to Stoat, while Beep built out a general storage crate and stocked the food bin with more food. Now equipped with that same polearm, some medical supplies, and some food, Leaky Bum set off to head back to Bast and try out his new weapons. While I didn't run into the Holy Nation, I did get to take on a group of scrawny cannibals, slaughtering them all, though it wasn't a cakewalk. I actually had to stop about halfway through and heal up, splinting my legs and arms in order to continue fighting, but by the end of the battle, Leaky Bum was the only one left standing. This also brought his polearm skill up to 11, which is kind of funny when you compare it to the other weapons. But at that point, I found a small hill and dropped the sleeping bag down on it to heal up before continuing. That was short-lived, however, when I noticed a small battle breaking out between some samurai and Holy Nation soldiers. After only a few moments of fighting, it was pretty clear that this was a lost cause, so I looped around, scooped up the sleeping bag, and hid from the Holy Nation as they healed up. I did manage to get in some sneak grinding, but was caught relatively quickly, forcing me to kill a sentinel before retreating further. Eventually, I stumbled across Drin, a seemingly destroyed city being used by the samurai as a makeshift base. It wasn't until I reached the city and looked down the hill that I noticed a massive battle taking place between the samurai and the Holy Nation. So, naturally, we sprinted down into the fray to help take on the Holy Nation Empire. After defeating the Empire soldiers, I attempted to win over the samurai by doing a little jig, only for them to get so aroused by this that the only thing they could conceivably think of was that they needed to kill Leaky Bum right then and there, forcing him to flee the area yet again. Now that I'm viewed as a threat by both sides, there wasn't really a reason for me to stick around. My whole goal here was to help the samurai in their war against the Holy Nation Empire, but if they want to kill me too, why help them? So instead, I headed back to Stoat, grabbed my heavy bow, and moved north into Cannibal country. 60 days ago, this place was terrifying, and I was always one wrong move away from death. But now, I don't see Leaky Bum having much of an issue dealing with the cannibals. It'll also be fighting for a good cause and helping the local villages along the coast. I ended up going with the ranger bow over anything else since it was a masterwork and took regular bolts. Obviously, it's not going to do as much damage as the heavy bow, but it's lighter to carry, and I'm really only planning on using it as a last resort or to initiate a fight. Of course, before I start cannibal hunting, I had to make a quick pit stop at World's End to buy some bolts for the crossbow. And now, on to the hunting. I can't believe I talked all that shit just to get kidnapped in the first fight. How embarrassing. Anyway, as we came up on the cannibal camp, I noticed fighting in the distance. I never thought I'd be so happy to see a group of scrawny cannibals. As soon as I could, I broke free and escaped to a nearby cliff, where I got a front row seat to the ensuing fight. Honestly, had a whole additional squad not come walking over, the scrawny cannibals might have actually won that fight. But that's life in Kenshi. It seemed stupid to leave, so I set up camp on the hilltop and rested for the night while the cannibals went to war with each other just a few hundred feet away from my position. From what I could tell, these were two rival factions who just happened to set up their camps right next to each other, and we're now seemingly fighting for control of the territory. It was actually really cool to watch, but it didn't make a difference to me who won. Either way, they're all still cannibals that need to be purged. As I dealt with the scrawny cannibals, another detachment from the Skull Drinker clan came waltzing in, forcing Leaky Bum back up onto the hilltop where he battled against multiple cannibals, eventually getting overpowered but managing to escape after the surviving cannibals all passed out from blood loss. I rested when I could, but was often interrupted by some stragglers trying to ambush me with thoughts of an easy meal. While fighting off would-be attackers, I actually ended up taking down the leader of the Skull Drinker clan. Talk about a fucking name. Anyway, he's wanted by the United Cities, so I stabilized him and began making the trek back to Stoat to sell him off. It wasn't so much for the cash as it was to hopefully get into the good graces of the United Cities. While on my way back, I came across a large force of holy soldiers making their way into Bass, so I sat behind them and ran around like a lunatic to level up stealth a bit. While doing so, the soldiers were actually ambushed by a squad of samurai, so I found a nice little spot to post up and started winging shots into the battle. This worked in a couple ways. 1, I got to kill some Holy Nation soldiers, and 2, I got to level my precision shooting, which can only be done by taking the Pat Tillman approach and shooting friendlies. Once the fight wrapped up, I helped heal up some of the wounded before continuing on my way back to Stoat to cash in the bounty. the bounty turned in, Leaky Bum rested at the bar for the night since beds heal you much faster than sleeping bags, and I know I've said that a ton of times by now, but I'm gonna keep saying it. And once Leaky Bum was all healed up, it was back to World's End for some better armor. Sure, the robes are great for martial arts, but that's not what we're doing here. Personally, I always like to rock the black plate armor since it doesn't seem to have as many skill debuffs as the white plated armor. It's got 100% coverage and some decent resistance and efficiency. Originally, I was going to rock some samurai pants, but ended up finding some specialist grade drifter's pants which have these same cut stats, but have better blunt resistance, so I took those instead. Lastly, I went over to the headgear store and purchased a specialist grade masked helmet, which was another tier up from the high grade masked helmet I had in my backpack. It's got the exact same stats as the armored plates mask that I already had, but 100% coverage instead of 75%. With that, I waited for Beak to make his way to World's End so that I could trade off the armor I had been wearing, so that I'd be free to get back to hunting cannibals. At around midnight on day 72, I came across a small village with a few cannibals tied up out front. As it turns out, this was the remnants of the Blind-Eyed Kin cannibal clan, and who else would be here but their leader, Kaka Nasi Nose. Another banger of a name. Similar to the last tribe, I stabilized the leader and brought them back to Stoat to turn them in. By midday, I made it back to that same field as a few days ago with the warring cannibal factions, and began slowly picking off stragglers as I made my way further into the zone. Eventually, I found myself face to face with a horde of scrawny cannibals. I could have probably taken a few of them with the polearm, but Leaky Bum was wounded, so I relied heavily on the crossbow for this portion, dropping most of the cannibals in the camp. By that night, I'd begun examining the prisoners, where I found a samurai conscript caged up and waiting to be butchered, so I healed him up and helped him escape. This took a bit of time since more cannibals just continued flooding through the site, and he's got a limp. But after several hours, he was able to finally escape as we looted the town hut. Now that I've gotten to try out the polearm, I figured it was time to spice things up a bit and once again swap weapons. This time to that big-ass pickaxe I took off the Slave King a while back. It's one of these things. Still have no clue how to pronounce it, but maybe one day we'll figure it out. Funny enough, it falls under blunt weapons instead of being classified as a heavy weapon, which I'd also like to try out at some point. While roaming Bast, I came across a group of samurai soldiers and fell into line with them for a bit, just kinda hoping they'd eventually come into contact with some cannibals or Holy Nation soldiers so that I wouldn't have to fight alone. It took over a day before I saw any combat, and even when I did, it was against some outlaw farmers. That being said, this thing hits in the 90s, so once I get a few more levels in the skill, this should be the best weapon I've ever swung. Just a few moments later, however, I came across a group of samurai fighting for their lives against some Holy Nation soldiers, so I hopped in to help. This was actually right next to a samurai outpost, so the fight was pretty one-sided, but I didn't mind. It just gave Leaky Bum the ability to get used to this new weapon with the luxury of not having to worry about death. Unfortunately, as the trend continues, I got too hyped on myself yet again and ended up getting kidnapped after taking on a large cannibal group solo. Thankfully, a small samurai scout team came to the rescue, ambushing the cannibals and allowing me to escape in the process. Well, not before beating the shit out of the rest of them and some of the Holy Nation soldiers that had wandered over. I will say, I do find Kenshi to be an incredibly beautiful game. Like, I can't think of many other indie games where scenes like this exist regularly. Early the following morning, I found a group of triangle bandits and tried to take them on, before getting knocked out again just before finishing off the group. Nothing like a good old-fashioned Kenshi ass-whooping to humble yourself, I guess. That being said, it didn't stop me from wiping out the survivors after coming to. Now, I realize I've basically done nothing but combat for the past few weeks, but don't worry, that's about to change. At least, momentarily. This is all the same, we're heading south. There's some potential allies down there that I wanted to meet with. Welcome to the land of opportunity. Sure, it smells like buttholes and broken dreams, but this is about as good as it gets. Mainly because we have some powerful friends here. They don't know they're our friends yet, but we're about to change that. The only major downside with joining the anti-slavers is that the United Cities kinda hates me now. But we prepared for this, and all of those cached bounties I'd been turning in actually prevented them from becoming hostile towards us. Since it was still relatively early, I took some time to explore the Royal Valley, looking for any additional outposts or cities in the area. As it turns out, this seems to be where the Southern Hive tends to congregate. Also, what the fuck is this thing? It walks on all fours but just fucking sprints at you on two legs? Originally, I bitched out and ran away, but I was compelled to go back because if I don't fight it now, I never will. Now, this only lasted for like, 30 seconds before I ran into a hive patrol and got my ass beat. I also came to the realization that King was outrunning me, so I wouldn't be able to just fire shots at him from a distance, and would probably need a few other soldiers with those triple shot bows to just volley bolts into it as the best method to take it out. So maybe I will end up coming back later. By the evening on day 79, I'd made it to the outskirts of my first target, Stack. Inside lies an Inquisitor that we're gonna kidnap, beat the shit out of, and then deliver to the Sheks to help them win their war against the Holy Nation. Now, the Sheks may be massive racists, but they're a better option than dealing with Catholics. Am I right, boys, between the ages of 4 and 16? At around midnight on day 80, Leaky Bum began his push into Stack. Unfortunately, the guards manning the turrets noticed him almost instantly, leading to the alarm being raised. These guys can borderline one-shot you with a lucky hit, so they were the primary target, and initially, I was able to carve through them. Everything was actually going really well here, until a squad returned from patrol duty, overwhelming and taking Leaky Bum prisoner. I was able to move all of my weapons into my backpack and drop it before being looted though, so all I need to do is heal up and escape. This was way easier than I thought it'd be, mainly because my stealth was so high that I could just walk up to a guard, knock him out, and execute them. Even with that method though, it was only a matter of time before the alarm was triggered, prompting Leaky Bum to sprint out, grab his backpack, and head back through the front gate, pulling High Inquisitor Seda and his bodyguards in pursuit. While most of them dipped out and ran home, I had to kill a few, and even save Beep's life from a rabid bone dog in the process. All in a day's work though, and it's not even noon yet. After spending a few hours resting up, it was back to work though. The two guards out front were easy to deal with, and we even got to showcase a little shootout between Lee and the two remaining turret guards. After getting fed up with that, Leaky Bum, completely of his own free will, I didn't do this, but he just ran in and took the dude out with his katana, pulling another 3 or 4 guards over, and had to deal with them as well. With the guards taken care of, I took more of a stealthy approach to the HQ. I waited until a prisoner tried to escape, drawing the attention of most of the sentinels, before sneaking in, executing an Inquisitor and a Paladin, and then successfully kidnapping High Inquisitor Seda. Now I could just take them straight to Squin and turn them in, but I thought it'd be more fun to take them on in a 1v1 first, using secondaries only. Now, I can't use a bow or my pickaxe, and they can't use their big-ass sword. It's purely a katana vs. saber sword fight. The son of a bitch even tried to pull a fast one and sprint off in the night, which I thought was a bit funny. This was actually a pretty fair fight, all things considered. Leaky Bum is going into this wounded, and while he may have more experience with his secondary than Seda, Seda's armor is so much better than what we're rocking. They also have higher skill levels in everything but defense. This was one of those fights where you kinda know what the outcome was gonna be before it happened, but you still watch and hold out hope that somehow, some way you'll pull it off. The katana just wasn't powerful enough to really pierce Seda's armor, and while Lee landed more shots than Seda, they were only dealing 5 to 7 damage at a time, whereas Seda's hits were landing for 24 or 25 apiece. Shout out Beak for being the impromptu bitch boy whose sole purpose is to carry Leaky Bum to safety whenever he goes down. I was all healed up by noon and ready for round 2. And by round 2, I mean killing a few more guards, sneaking into the HQ, kidnapping Seda again, and then taking him out into the desert for a second face-off. I will admit though, this time I kinda cheated a bit. And by that I mean I allowed Lee to use his pickaxe since it's significantly stronger than the katana. Another close fight, but this time we managed to knock Seda down. Normally here I'd do a best of 3, but fuck Seda. We're trying to win a war here, not play with our food. After handing him over to the Sheks, I followed the soldiers upstairs and stole all of the high quality gear off of him. Funny enough, there's still got the red Saber boss hanging out here, so maybe these two can take each other to the Diddy party once I leave. It took less than a day for the Shek Kingdom to take over Stack, and I'm kinda bummed I missed it. I was too busy running back from Squin to take part in it, but they fully remodeled the HQ, and had some Joey Swall looking guards hanging out front. Oh, there's also Shek patrols now in this area, which I thought was really cool and wasn't expecting to see. Anyway, remember this place? Oh, the memories. Well, today we're gonna do more of that whole slaughtering the guards thing. I'm not entirely sure where Tabos is, but I'm just gonna go on a Karen spree and see if I can find a manager to talk to. Initially, I had a ton of success taking a more stealthy approach, knocking out my enemies and then executing them while they were down. But that only lasted so long, until I was caught snapping some dude's neck in broad daylight, alerting most of the guards. After a short scuffle in the streets, we finally drew out our target, Inquisitor Tavos. At this point, it was back to normal tactics. Pull the guards out to the river, use it as cover, and take pot shots at them when I can. While resting, I noticed that the strategy I'd been using for months now was actually slowly boosting me up all the way to level 52 swimming, which I thought was pretty funny. Just casually grinding out 50 levels in a skill that I never even considered looking at. By that evening, I was ready for another round of killing guards. Just look at how many bolts are lodged in this dude's skull. He's gonna end up with some Tua Tungavaloa levels of CTE after this. And what better way to deal with these injuries than by being taken prisoner and thrown into a cell again. Last time I ever get cute with it and try to do a little fun shootout. Luckily for me, the guards left me alone, so I was able to break out pretty easily and then head downstairs and loot some medical supplies. They kind of fucked up here though. See, now I'm behind enemy lines, and I know where the HQ is, so all I need to do is sneak in and take out the Inquisitor. Easy enough. This took a few hours to pull off because I was essentially able to sneak into the HQ unseen and begin executing the sleeping guards. There were a few scares where everyone would suddenly jolt up, but since my stealth was so high, I was able to escape without being seen and then go back in once everyone had calmed down. This happened 2 or 3 times until all of the guards inside were dead. In which case I walked over to Tavos, knocked him out, and kidnapped him. Since the guards were busy watching the front gate and not their backs, I was able to sneak right up to them, kill the remaining 3 guards, walk out the front door, and make a mad sprint to Squin. And just like that, 2 major Holy Nation cities are now under Shek control. For some reason, holy mines and camps haven't been raided or cleared though, leading to Beak getting ambushed and taken as a slave. So we'll have to address that. While Leaky Bum freed the slaves, Beak got his first victory. I know, it's taken 83 days for this moment to happen, but he did it, and no one can take that away from him. With Beep safe from harm, Lee finished off the remaining soldiers in the camp and freed any remaining slaves still in the area before heading off for Blister Hill. Now, sadly, I forgot to check the corpses for the gear they stole from Beak. Things like Sata's sword and the sleeping bag are missing entirely, and since we're so far away now, I think it's safe to say that those items have despawned completely, which sucks, but it's not a huge deal since we can get another sleeping bag relatively easily, and I wasn't going to use that sword anyway. With that though, I snuck into Blister Hill and began weakening their forces inside by assassinating any guards I could get to safely. Of course, by that I mean tripping the alarm after killing 4 people and having to fight for my life in the middle of the streets. Luckily for me, there were river raptors outside, which drew the attention of any guards that were still chasing me, and allowed me to escape to the hillside where I healed up, before getting jumped again. The city is too big to just fight my way through it. Hell, I tried twice and hadn't even made it to the inner portion where the leader was hiding. I also need to heal up. My chest and stomach were one hit away from me ending up as a slave prisoner again, so we need to fix that as well. So here's my plan. Beak will go to Stack, which is now under Shek control, and purchase a sleeping bag to bring back. Once he's back, we'll set up a camp and fully heal up. While he's gone, I'll try to take out a few more guards with the crossbow. I don't need to kill them, just weaken them. Basically, I need them to still be able to guard the front gate, but have significant injuries so I can just one-shot them when I need to. Oh, also, it looks like they stole my sword and pickaxe, so all I have left is my crossbow. And these hands. Over the course of several hours, I was able to slowly whittle down the guards near the gate, winging shots at them and then kiting them around, until eventually, I dropped the right guard and was able to reclaim both of my melee weapons. With my weapons secured, there's no real reason to stay out here right now. So Leaky Bum ran on over to Stack to meet up with Beak and rest at a bar until he recovered the following morning. Now fully healed, I devised a new plan. I'd sneak back in and confirm that Phoenix was there. Once I had visual confirmation, I'd run into the barracks and turn myself in as a prisoner, dropping my gear in the nearby weapon racks and barrels. This way, I could break out and kill off a few soldiers and then pop back into the cage. I'd likely take a few days to get the numbers down to a reasonable amount, but what else was there to do? I didn't have any army to just siege the city with, and there's over 250 soldiers in this city, with another 70 or so out on patrol. By the morning of day 86, I was able to clear out the police station in its entirety and had begun pushing into the throne room. This was a huge pain in the ass because there's like 50 guards in there. Understandably, but they catch you after like 1 or 2 kills, so it was a constant state of running in, assassinating like 2 soldiers, getting caught, and then sprinting back to the police station. Moving into day 87, I'd killed about 50 guards and was getting to the point of impatience where I'd just try to take out a few with martial arts as soon as I was caught, just to try and speed up the process a tad. It's been 4 days of this, but I was finally starting to get close to Phoenix. I just needed to be able to land a shot. That being said, I think they finally figured out what I was doing, because this dude just came over and picked me up and slowly brought me back to the throne room, only for him to set me down just outside and try to duel me for some reason. The rest of day 88 consisted of killing another dozen or so soldiers, just slowly making progress and thinning out all of the dudes sitting in the throne room. This may have been super tedious, but on the bright side, I managed to level my assassination skill up into the 90s. My martial arts skill is coming along nicely as well. It's already over level 40 and should continue slowly climbing. That being said, Leaky Bum's legs are both practically broken, so I took the rest of the day to hang out in my cage and heal up a bit. In the early morning hours of day 89, I snuck back into the throne room to find it mostly empty. After killing a few guards, I took a minute to meme on the king and sit on the throne. Look at this dude's face. Honestly, I completely forgot what he looked like. It's been so long. But he looks like he hasn't slept in months. Actually, you know what he reminds me of? Is that, I don't know if it's World War II or like Vietnam, but the little like animated cartoon soldier who's just sitting there with like the shell shock face. That's what he reminds me of. But instead of that, he's got the derp face going on. Anyway, Holy Lord Phoenix was vibing upstairs, so I snuck onto the roof, killed his bodyguard, and then successfully spammed assassination attempts until I knocked him out. Looting him for all of his gear in the process and kidnapping him. With Phoenix slumped over my shoulder, I ran back to the police station, retrieved my gear, and booked it for the water. Normally, I'd take him on in the 1v1 again, but I really didn't want to risk it in this case. This was the leader of the Holy Nation Empire, and I'm not about to risk him getting away because he landed one lucky shot on me. After reaching Squin, however, I was instructed to find Bayon, or Bayon, however you pronounce his name, and deliver the Phoenix to him. He's located over in the faction HQ in Oddmog though, so I pulled a Forrest Gump and started running. Turning in the Holy Nation's leader gives you a 100,000 cash reward, along with becoming allied with the Sheks, which is arguably way better than the cash prize. With their ruler behind bars, the Holy Nation will continue to crumble. It's only a matter of time before the Sheks fully conquer them. Oh, unrelated, but the Sheks also refer to me as the Battleborn now, which is just so badass. And you can recruit random patrols to come follow you into battle. Another really cool feature of the game that I never actually knew about or messed with until this, so cool. Want to see something even cooler than that? Blister Hill, that city we were just in, the capital of the Holy Nation Empire, it's just completely in ruins. The gates are locked shut, but when you break in, all of the buildings have been destroyed and the prisoners that were locked up are just waiting to be rescued. Which means, at least I think, all of the major Holy Nation cities have been conquered or razed. Meaning there's only one place left to go. Back to where it all began. Rebirth is the last stop on our mission to destroy the Holy Nation Empire. And I couldn't think of a better place to end this part of the story than here. Of course, I did have to make a quick pit stop at Stoat to swap out the Eagle's Cross for the shorter but more powerful heavy bow, but I didn't think I needed a bow with a max range of like 300 meters when I'll mainly be fighting in close quarters. And that's really what it was. I got rid of the guards at the front gate and pushed into this separated portion of the camp. Once reinforcements showed up, I went ahead and pulled them out into the field so that I didn't have to worry about turret fire, and clean them up as well. That's not to say this was easy though. Lee had taken some pretty substantial damage to his stomach and legs, making fighting a bit more difficult. It didn't help that Beak was across the map getting shit-faced in the bar, meaning I had nowhere to set up camp at in the meantime. But this wasn't Beep's fight. This was personal. During the night on day 92, I found the Inquisitor running the show over at Rebirth and decided to take him out. Side note here, I actually didn't even know there was an Inquisitor in Rebirth. I thought it was all just guards. So this kind of immediately changed my focus from raiding the entire camp to just taking out the Inquisitor. Those are the same people who created that Safehouse just north of the camp that saved our lives multiple times throughout this run. I like to think that the ninjas smelled blood in the water, came over while I was gone, and wiped out the guards, prompting all of the slaves to join them in rebellion, culminating with all of them living in the camp happily ever after. A nice way to end this story in my eyes. With the Holy Nation crumbling around us, I decided to wrap up one more loose end and go after the Cannibal King. See, about a month ago in-game, I'd taken out a few of the tribe leaders, but there's one legend that sits over in Dead Cat who rules over all of the warring tribes. And because of that, he needs to be held accountable for his actions. The Grand Wizard is inside the hut sleeping, but he's got his chiefs sitting out in front on guard duty. They all have bounties on them as well, but I'm not here for that today. I'm simply here for the Grand Wizard. At first, I simply tried brute forcing my way in, only to be greeted by dozens of cannibals waiting to tear my limbs off. This inevitably led to a crossbow conga line with small spurts of sword fighting mixed in. The problem with brute forcing is that it doesn't account for reinforcements showing up though, which just kinda doubled the enemy numbers. This battle went on for a good few hours, but at one point another tribe had wandered over, forcing the situation to turn into more of a free-for-all than anything. I tried to stick with the bow and then swap to melee when there were only 1 or 2 cannibals near me, since those were easy wins. See, I had an advantage though. I'd seen Revenge of the Sith, so I knew just how important the high ground was to my success here. So all I had to do was post up on top of the hill and fire bolts down into the battle, wiping out the remaining cannibals relatively easily. Just look at the carnage here. And to think there's likely another similar sized group just waiting for me back at Dead Cat still. Just insane. As I made my way back down the hill, I noticed a group of scrawny cannibals fighting a Beak thing and ran in to help the creature. Something I never thought I'd do, but as it turns out, I'm fucking unstoppable and can just one-shot all of these guys. As I approached the city, I noticed all the cannibals seemed to be preoccupied, so I just kinda waltzed into town, snuck up on the Grand Wizard, and kidnapped him. He's wanted by the United Cities, so I started making my way towards Stoat with the leader of the cannibals, or the KKK, same name, slumped over my shoulder. I was able to hand the Grand Wizard over on the morning of day 94, and for once in his life, Leaky Bum was finally at peace. At least for now. There's really only one or two enemies left to fight, so I dropped my extra gear off at our shelter and stack and began making my way south. It's time for the Bugmaster. Well, first, welcome to Oni Castle, home to Aka and Ao Oni. I think that's how you pronounce them. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that they each have a 120k bounty on them, and they're big as shit. It's worth noting that there's a ton of legendary gear here that you can loot if you just sneak past the duo, but the goal wasn't to loot the place, it was to take these two doofuses. Alright, clearly I'm outmatched here, so I'm just gonna leave these guys be for now. Well, that would be the case, but apparently this is where all of the Beak things like to breed, so there's hundreds of them. And when one of the Oni dorks came out to fight me again, he was subsequently swarmed by them, allowing me to just kind of sit back and watch the show while healing up. Sure, he'd take out a few of them every hour or so, but then like 3 more would just come wandering over to join the fight. After he killed all of them, I tried to kite him around again and was actually having some decent success, before being forced to stop in order to save a familiar friend's life. See, while all this was going on, I had sent Beak down to help out, but he ended up getting eaten alive by a shit ton of Beak things. I was able to rescue him and get their aggro back onto the Oni bros who were fighting outside of the gate. This allowed me to lock the gate behind me, keeping them out, and heal up Beak, letting him recover in the sleeping bag just inside of the gate. The Onis are untouchable for me right now. It took like 30 Beak things and they were still able to walk away without a scratch on them. So congrats to them, they're off the hook for now. In the meantime, Beak's in bad shape, so Leaky Bum ran him all the way back to friendly lines, having him rest in Squin for the night to recover. We've got some robotic limbs over in Stoat, but Beak's legs were too shredded to run that far on his own without being killed along the way. Once we made it to Squin, the duo knocked out at the bar for a few hours before Leaky Bum woke up, said farewell to Beak, and headed back south. If there's one thing that makes my skin crawl, it's these fucking things. I can't stand them. If you haven't figured out what I'm doing yet, it's Bugmaster time. I mean, I said it like literally a minute ago in the script, so I don't know, guys, lock in. Come on, what the fuck? There's a ton of blood spiders and skin spiders in the outpost that I need to deal with before I reach him though. Luckily, I can just kite them around with the crossbow, and it also helps that for some reason there's some other bounty hunters in the area trying to get a shot at the Bugmaster, so while they were busy being eaten alive, I pushed into the outpost. This lasted for a few seconds until I walked inside to see it swarming with spiders. Eventually, I was pushed all the way back down the hill where I came into contact with some surviving bounty hunters. While they fought, I tried to rest. Only to run into a massive swarm of these things. seriously guys, the amount of times I've gotten like the chills or squirmed around in my chair during this section was unbearable. Anyway, after almost dying again here, I tried to slowly pick off the spiders, resulting in me being temporarily eaten alive. Only surviving because the damn thing got distracted by a wounded blood spider. Now, this may have not been the most climactic scene, but it's the only way I could think to pull this off. With the Bugmaster captured, I looted his chest for a strange map, and then booked it for safety, with hundreds of spiders chasing after me. Leaky Bum was able to reach Oddmog by sunrise, handing over the Bugmaster and receiving another 100,000 cat prize, bringing us up to just under 1 million cats. With another major enemy behind bars, it was time to rest and recover, which is code for taking 3 Benadryl and passing out in a random bar. Once he was mostly recovered, Leaky Bum set out for his final chapter. All those guys we'd been turning in as prisoners for like the entire video? Well, we've got a plan for him. Call it a new lease on life, if you will. Sure, it meant breaking our alliance with the Shek kingdom, but that didn't bother me at all. Along with them, I went to Squin and freed 2 High Inquisitors. I would have freed Tavos as well, but he didn't want to talk for some reason, so he can rot. After converting them all to the cause, I read the Bugmaster's map, disclosing the location of an ominous place out in the Ashlands. I went ahead and bought 2 wooden backpacks and loaded them up with supplies for our journey. While our new allies began making their way south, Beak was busy running to Stoat in order to attach a new left arm and grab all of our food and extra weapons. Same with Leaky Bum. While Beak ran to Stoat, he was on his way back to Stack to scoop up all the weapons and armor that we've been dropping off there throughout the playthrough. Unfortunately, due to Beep's overwhelming handsomeness, the guards attacked him and took him hostage, so the plan quickly changed to drop off the gear to the Inquisitors and Bugmaster, and then send Lee back to bail out Beep and pick up the rest of the gear. I still think it's hilarious that the best way to travel is by dumping all of my heavy shit onto Beep and then tossing him over the shoulder like a sack of potatoes and then just run to wherever I need to go. By the afternoon on day 99, we were all grouped up and ready to get moving. On our way to the ominous place. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ashlands, and whatever the fuck a cleanser unit is. There's also squads of Legion skeletons that we're going to avoid for now because I feel like a group of them is lethal. I imagine the big appeal of this place are the ancient domes that have a ton of locked crates, likely containing endgame loot like AI cores and all that fun stuff. There's also Cat-Lon's Exile, which is just fucking loaded with these dudes. And much like Cat-Lon, we too shall look to enjoy a life of solitude. For 100 days, we fought, scratched, clawed, killed, stole, murdered, committed unspeakable acts, upended entire empires. It seemed like the only way to escape the chaos was to head to a land where chaos had thrived for thousands of years. Here's a skill recap as well. We started at level 1 for everything and ended up getting several skills into the 80s, with 3 even making it into the 90s. In all honesty, I probably could have gotten a few more into the 90s, but I got distracted doing other stuff like waging war on factions and collecting bounties. I mean, shit, just look at the cash we have at our disposal. All mostly legit, too. Will there be another time where Leaky Bum is called upon for another adventure to continue honing his skills, destroying another faction, or maybe a little of both? Of course. The big question that begs to be solved is, will he answer the call? Only time will tell. Until then, we rest. Thank you all so much for watching. Kenshi is one of my all-time favorite games, so it's always a great time when I get to sit down and make a video on it. I've been working on this story for several months now, starting all the way back in May, so hopefully you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed writing this. This actually wasn't even supposed to be a 100 days video, but I'd realized around day 94 that I'd done basically everything I wanted to do aside from continue to grind out more skills, and even then, there's still so many other skills to grind and factions to upend. We didn't even start a settlement or fight the Silence of the Lamb robots, so please believe me when I say this is truly an open-ended story. There are plans to continue it, I just don't know when. Until next time though, I appreciate you all. Go call a loved one. And thanks for stopping by.